Hello, everyone. This is Raise Your Voice. I am Brett Rutherford, joined by my co host, Darby Robinson. Darby, we last recorded the Rays. We're still undefeated. No longer. Baseball, as you know, you weren't going to go 162 and 0. You lose 2 or 3 in Toronto, and they're in the middle of what I'm assuming they're going to be swept by the Cincinnati Reds. And so,
Yeah, with
game
what
one
it
is going
what
on now.
yeah, no, the Great American Ballpark has always been a horror show. So if they could escape with one win and nobody hurt, that would be the greatest victory the Rays have ever achieved in the state of Ohio. So I think that would be the pinnacle. And I will settle for nobody getting hurt, even if it is a very embarrassing sweep. But yeah, hopefully they can get back onto some winning ways and kind of rebound. It is kind of funny. So the previous two 13-0 teams, one went on a bad losing streak, and the other didn't. So it really could go either way. Right now, there's a lot of losses.
First off, it's really weird being in Cincinnati back to back seasons. And that's just
Yeah.
something we're going to have to get used to with the new schedule. Um, the Rays were there last year. It went terribly wrong. It was in July. They lost on 2 walk-offs and then lost 10-5. But I believe it's the series where Shane Baz was injured, Wander Franco was injured, Kevin
Mm-hmm.
Kiermaier was injured, and it really kind of soured the feeling around the
The season
Rays.
ended. The season
Yeah.
pretty much died there. Yeah, because that was like the Wander hamate bone
Mm-hmm.
break, which you kind of knew was like he's not gonna return normal even if he does get back.
Yeah.
Like if he comes back, which he did, he probably wouldn't have the power, wouldn't have the juice, and he still played pretty well when he came back, but he was definitely not like the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the way the losses went, they were very winnable games against a very bad team, and you had a walk off balk or a balk off with Matt Whistler. That was awful. Yeah, it was just a really bad series, really bad vibes. Um, so it's just I feel like the state of Ohio has it out for the Rays. They lose in the postseason, score only one run. Uh, Now Cincinnati was a horror show. More bad vibes. The something rotten in the Skyline chili.
Yeah, and these were all like 3.5 hour games last year. Um,
At least they're quicker. Yeah,
yeah,
at least the series can get over quicker if Manfred's rules holds true.
but I do want to talk about the Toronto series, where it did not go very well. I think Rays fans, you get to that 13th win, but the mood, even when you got to the 13th win, was a little bit dampened by the Jeffrey Springs injury, which we can talk about in a little bit. But then you go into Toronto, which happens to be the first quote unquote good team that you're playing on the
Mm-hmm.
road. They very much wanted to be the team that ended the streak. They very much see themselves as contenders in the AL East. And they are, and they're probably AL, just contenders, and they could win a World Series this year. They're that talented. Especially Kevin Kiermaier, who I think publicly said, "Yeah, I'd love to end the race streak. I love those guys, but I'm on the other side now, and we play to win." And I guess we're just lucky that he didn't steal any, pitcher cards from Christian Bethencourt or Francisco Mejia. But Darby, I
Yeah.
mean, it was just I don't, especially the way the series ended. They played great on Sunday. But I'm not worried about losing 2 or 3 in Toronto. A very tough place to play, and they had really good crowds there this weekend.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing: all of the noise and complete BS with the loud fans or very loud sportscasters that talk about like, well, they haven't played anybody or whatever, like that. All of that stuff that's just being loud and
Mhm.
wrong. It's like that doesn't change that. That's just showing your ignorance. And making yourself look like a jackass more than it's showing anything about like the team. Obviously, 13 wins in a row is historic. It's amazing. Doesn't matter the competition. That's still pretty impressive, and it was also impressive the way they did it. But the Blue Jays are also a very good team. They are them, the Yankees and the Rays coming into this season. Anybody that knows ball, we're going to be seeing those three teams as a pretty tough three-way race for the division, and more than likely those two teams are going to be hard to beat for the wild card as well. Like the AL East is a bloodbath, because you also have Baltimore, which is right in there. Boston is clearly the weakest, but they still have some good talent coming in. Like they're not like completely bad. Like if that's your worst team, they could win any series against any of these other AL East teams.
They'd be contenders in the AL Central. I mean, they'd be right up there.
Right, exactly. I mean, you have way worse teams in throughout baseball than them. So I think the Blue Jay series was a good test, right? But like in it by game 30, I feel like we will stop caring about like, oh, is this a good team, or what is this team? Do the Rays have an offense? Are they a good offense, or were they just playing really bad teams? Is their bullpen good? Is their pitching good? What's I think there's a lot of questions right now that come from early season, and that consistent sense, I think, from a lot of Rays fans and like just the media, that the Rays are always constantly the team that has to kind of prove themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's never like a benefit of the doubt. It's always like a proof, like, well, that's probably not real, or well, they probably did this because of this reason, or like, well, they're winning, but it's probably that. There's always like a qualifier. And there's not like that benefit of the doubt where it comes from. Like the Braves, steamroll like a really bad team. They go, well, the Braves are great. The Rays are constantly winning the AL East. They're constantly going to the postseason 4 years in a row. This is a perennial contending team with a bunch of very talented players, budding superstar in Wander Franco, who is leading or second in baseball in extra base hits as of yesterday. This is a very good team. So I think the first parts of the season are always my most frustrating, because I feel like the takes come in hot and heavy and are the most unhinged and the most untethered to like facts or reality.
I mean, you saw, it's the prove yourself. If the Atlanta Braves had Wander Franco, Brandon Lau, and Randy Rosarena in any order, because we've seen Cash mix it up already this season, in the middle of their lineup, you would hear, I think, the same talking points, like, wow, this Braves lineup is stacked with those three guys. They're just not like
Right.
Austin Riley and Ronald Acuna and Matt Olson and Sean Murphy. They're not, maybe, I guess, those names that get more attention, even though I do think the tide is starting to turn there. But it took a 13-game win streak for like Randy Rosarena to be on SportsCenter every morning. It didn't just take being very good, for the last 4 years, making the postseason for the last 4 years, to get to making a World Series, a few years ago. The Rays were even knocked down, I think, number 2 in MLB.com's power rankings. And I tell myself every season, do not read the power rankings. Do not comment in the power rankings. Do not dare go to Twitter complaining about the power rankings. But this is a podcast. We got to have stuff to talk about. I'm okay with that. Like, the Braves might very well be better than the Rays. They're a very good team too. But they bumped up
at this
number
point
1, and the Rays fell down to 2 because they lost a series.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, the Braves have 4 losses, the Rays have 2, about to be 3 with the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, who cares? Like, that's all. Like, I do not get mad about seeing the Braves at number 1 in the power rankings, because whatever, it's not. I think the thing is, what I sort of look at, and maybe this is just like a different way of perceiving it, so like it's not as fun for like the discourse, but what I perceive of it is, the early part of the season, I really want to see kind of what's real and what's not. And to do that, I kind of put them into multiple big categories of like, who are like good contending teams, who are maybe some fun, interesting teams that are going to need stuff to break well, and who are just okay. We can pretty much write them off. And I think that's the cat. Like, it's not like the difference between the Braves, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and the Rays. They're all just like, those are all like very good teams, right? And so like by midseason, if the Braves, if Acuna and Freed and like Olsen are injured, like they're not going to be that good. But that doesn't change the fact that they're like a very well-built team. Like they're a contending team. The Yankees, Stanton's injured, so if Judge went down and Cole went down, they're a much worse team. But as long as they're healthy, and if they stay healthy, Stanton's already injured, but like he misses a month regardless. That's baked in. They're going to be a great team. So I think early on, I'm not looking at like who's number 1, who's number 5. It's really just like, okay, the Rays came in, they're playing really good baseball. We'll talk about the injuries because that's a big part of it, but this is a very good team. Okay, they're a playoff contender. They're a World Series contender. That's the category they're in. That's the bushel they're in. If you want to be like, well, the Braves are actually a little bit better, or the Blue Jays are better because they beat them, and they're okay, fine, sure. That's the argument. We can have that discussion, but that's really like, we don't know enough about where these teams are to maybe rank them in that way. But I think we do know enough right now from a lot of these teams, like, okay, that's a team that can go places. This is a team that can go places. Then there's the others that are like, oh, they're maybe interesting. They're not going to be abjectly bad. And then you got the teams that, yeah, I think we just know are gunning for the number 1 pick already.
Well, maybe now, because now we have the lottery, right?
We do have the lottery, so at least there'll be some people trying to get to the Ewing ice the card in the or whatever. Who's Manfred gonna to push towards which team gets the one? Detroit?
Maybe
not Oakland.
Definitely
Oakland,
not Oakland. Detroit seems like the team that, like, for the last couple of years has been like, oh, we're rebuilding. It's going to get exciting.
You'd want them to be, if you were the league office, if you could put your finger on the scales, you'd probably want them because they're like a historic franchise.
And I think the Angels have taken that step this year, but I think maybe you wish that they had a couple like really bad seasons.
Yes.
But I wouldn't trust their front office to like draft good prospects. Although Zach Neto is like in the big leagues, like in his first year, and
very, very quick. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of that.
I was going to bring him up next anyways, but it seems like it's a good time now. Josh Lowe just hits a solo home run in the top of the 9th.
The home run streak continues.
Yeah, it does. 17 straight. That's is that it's not a record, right? I think the Mariners did 20.
It's not. Did 19 games in a row 20 in a row in 2019. That's where I was getting the numbers. They did 20 home runs or 20 straight games with a home run in 2019. They also then, I think, finished with 68 wins that year. What a weird team. What a weird team. That's home runs are not only thing, but that's neat. Josh Lowe.
But Josh Lowe, I do want to talk about him because he's been awesome. He's a guy that, like, even I was harsh on. I was so harsh on him last year that I was saying on this podcast that I wish the Rays hadn't traded Austin Meadows. And I was never an Austin Meadows guy either. And so I was championing Austin Meadows in favor of Josh Lowe. But so far this year, Josh Lowe has been incredible. He has cut his, career strikeout rate, even in the minors by, almost in half, putting up numbers. Really, he hasn't put up at any point in his career in professional baseball with just 16.7 strikeout rate. 7.1% walk rate. He's hitting 359 with a 405 on base, with 3 home runs. Now he just hit his 4th in garbage time of this game. But ultimately, Josh Lowe looks a much more comfortable hitter. He's seeing the ball really well, and I wouldn't say like I don't want him in center field, but gone are the days where the Rays have Kiermaier, Phillips, and Margot, and so. While Jose Siri is out, which we'll talk about more, having Josh Lowe as like your second choice center fielder is still a pretty good thing because he's not a liability out there. Like, he can handle it, and he's long enough and quick enough to be able to cover that ground.
Yeah, he's not your plus, but he's not a minus. And I think that's still that's useful. That's very valuable. You're still going to want to have Margot or Siri in center field for that plus level defense. But yeah, no, Josh Lowe being able to play a competent center field and a solid above average, corner outfield is a big step. I also was not a believer because I saw a bat and the big hole for Josh Lowe, the big thing that he was missing was he had one of the worst in all of baseball strikeout rates, or at least contact rates, I should say, against pitches 95 miles an hour or above. And that's the people that don't hit that are batters that are all bottom tier.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs to have a good bat. Like he needs to have that power bat. So when you look at that, you look at that potential flaw, and that could be a fatal flaw.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this could be bad. Now, Nate Lowe, oddly enough, his brother had the same problem. He has done a lot better. They both were absolute punishing against breaking balls and off speed, but the fastball and the heaters were kind of their kryptonite. Nate Lowe has gotten much better. Josh Lowe this year has done a lot better at being able to be selective. He always had a good eye. He always drew walks. He saw a lot of pitches at the plate last year. The big key was figuring out what to attack and then swinging hard at it. We talked about this last week with Wander Franco. It's the same type of thing. This year, his regular exit velocity is below his career norm, only at 86 miles per hour, but the max EV is at 109.4, which is usually what you want to look at because that's showing that's the good contact, right? Your consistent contact, you're going to have bad, you're going to have good. The max EV is like when you can barrel it, that's what you can do. 109.4 is legit. He's already gotten 3 barrels so far this year. He had 6 all of last year. So he's not hitting the ball consistently hard every swing, but he is doing a lot more damage because I think he's getting more selective. He's able to maybe spoil off those fastballs and then force pitchers into accounts to then punish the breaking balls and the off speed. And he's done it even against some lefties too, that's another big thing. He had huge reverse split, or he had huge regular splits. He's been able to hold his own against lefties, maybe not be somebody you want in there constantly against left-handed pitching, but somebody that you can leave into the game as you get late into the bullpen against lefties.
Yeah, I think, launch angle, he's just lifting the ball a little bit. He's not even putting up big exit velo numbers. He's just kind of finding the gaps right now and not striking out and making good contact. And it's just an improvement, like a noticeable improvement. If you watched, not even watching every game thus far, but if you just watched a handful of his at-bats from this year compared to last year, just feels like more of a big league hitter, which again goes back to he was a rookie last year and he played like a rookie the same way that Taylor Walls did. And the problem was, and again, not talking about lineup protection, but just the state of the Rays lineup last year when guys like Wander and Brandon Lau were out, and Mike Zunino was either hurt or having a bad year. There just were a lot of guys in that lineup that couldn't mask the fact that you had a rookie, Josh Lowe, that you were trying to get at bats, or guys like Taylor Walls, and I think that caused them to really struggle. And now this year, I think some of that pressure's off, and the whole team is seeing the ball really well, playing really well, and I'm just happy to see Josh Lowe because that was a prospect where, okay, we haven't been able to bring in the left-handed bat. David Peralta, the Rays, I think Rays fans have been asking that for a couple of years now. David Peralta was our best shot at it, and that didn't work out. Now he's with the Dodgers. So for Josh Lowe, if he were to not work out, if he were to start inching closer to that bust territory, left-handed outfielder, no one else behind him. Manzardo's a left-handed hitter coming up, but it would have just felt like a big swing and a miss. So I'm really glad to see him doing well and, get the Rays on the board, keep that streak alive. And I guess it's some sort of consolation when you get stomped in Cincinnati.
Well, I think the key is on the whole, you're going to lose 60 plus games a year. What was the whole bucket is 50 games you win automatically, 50 games you lose automatically. It's what you kind of do with the others. It's like your season.
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have bad games where, today this is one of those weird ones against Cincinnati. And you'll, when you listen to this, you'll probably know more about the rest of the series. But the first game, the Rays sort of outperformed the Reds in terms of expected batting average. They did generate offense. It's just some big defensive plays, some just small miscues. They couldn't quite knock it through. The Reds basically scored on everything. A couple walks, both of them score. A couple hit by pitches, both of them score. It is one of those games. When it comes to Josh Lowe, you wanted to see him still be in the thick of it, still like hunting for pitches, because this is a long season and he needs to stick around. And he does play a big role. I mean, that left-handed bat role, that is going to be the key. Like when other teams roll out left-handed pitching, you have the lineup that can absolutely do a ton of damage, but it's against right-handed pitching, which is the majority. You need to have a couple guys that can really dominate against that type of pitching. And Josh Lowe has been that. You mentioned David Peralta because there was a lot of talk and potential of him coming back. The Rays could have re-signed him and potentially we're looking at it. But there was that discussion about, do you go with a vet like David Peralta, who's your like kind of safe floor but lower ceiling, or do you try to give one more shot with somebody like Josh Lowe, who's only 25 and was a top prospect? He was a top 50 major league, all of baseball prospect. This is a guy that has the athletic tools and bat tools to be a potential impact player. And you kind of want to make sure you know what you have there before you give up on it entirely. So far, right now, Josh Lowe's been hitting very well. He's got a not sustainable, but we'll love it until, if he keeps hitting a couple hits a game and a home run like he did today. 213 WRC plus. So he's 113% better than your average replacement player. Compared to David Peralta, who's only batting 200 with a 226 on base percentage, a 233 slugging percentage, and a 24 WRC plus. So over 13 games as well. No home runs still for David Peralta. He is more a bench role in LA, but Jason Hayward has sort of taken David Peralta's spot in a lot of ways. So that's an interesting. The Dodgers really built a very interesting team this year with a bunch of like, hey, I know that guy. They're 36 now,
and they're they're still going to waltz into 95 wins. Like, I don't know. This might be the year, and they've had some injuries too.
Yeah,
this might be the year where I was really high in Arizona coming into the year. They're in first place by a game now. Obviously, the Padres are
very fun team.
Yeah, and the Padres are still very good. So maybe this is the year that it doesn't work out for the Dodgers. But I know people, it's always said, well, okay, the Rays just went with the young guy because they wanted to save the, I don't know, I'm going to guess that David Peralta signed for $6 million.
He signed for 6.5.
Okay, so yeah, 6.5 million. Like the people are going to say, oh, the Rays just wanted to save that money. Well, it's like, okay, sure, but again, for a player that they still believe in, and it's Josh Lowe plus Luke Raley. I think if you gave Eric Neander, Peter Bendix, whoever else makes this decision, some truth serum, their hope was, okay, maybe one of Luke Raley or Josh Lowe works out, and the other we have to move on from at some point this season. We'll bring someone else in, or we'll just move the roster around. Luckily, right now, they're both working, and I'd like it to stay that way because I like watching them both play. But I'm guessing like that was the bet. We could sign David Peralta, who was already declining. He's older. Maybe, he's got a higher floor because he's not at that point where you're like Nelson Cruz, where you're just waiting to fall off the cliff.
Yeah, I was going to say like that. It's I say a higher floor, but like Father Time can basically make a sinkhole underneath that floor at any moment. And it really can go, you can go from cruising along like Nelson Cruz to, well, you all know.
I think it was in Keith
You
Law.
saw it.
Yeah. Oh, we all have witnessed it.
We watched it. We all had to experience that.
I think I read it in one of Keith Law's books, but it's pretty astonishing to see like the consistency in which hitters, almost all hitters, except for your statistical anomalies, like your Hall of Fame level players that just have a different gift. How many big leaguers just stop hitting like after the age of 32? Like it becomes very hard just because the human eyeball and the human body and our nervous system just starts to die at around that age and never get better.
I think it's just difficult enough to hit a ball at peak level. So
Yeah.
you lose even just that fraction, and it's getting harder by the day. Every pitcher is just getting like better and better.
I got really
But
sad
yes,
that
we
I'm
talked.
already past the point of where you are like the best you'll ever be at video games. Like I read that in a book,
Yeah.
like, oh, after 21 or 22, like that's your peak and you're never gonna get better. So that was a tough read
Oh,
for
it's
me.
all downhill from here. You're gonna try to Julio Franco your way to still being around and useful, kicking around, or Ricky Henderson. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think with the Rays right now, what we've seen from the team and consistently, I mean, I think the Toronto series we saw still some standout individual performances, but like a lot of struggling there. We still are seeing a team that's built very well top to bottom, has a lot of options to roll with, but I think you have a lot of pieces that just work, that I
Yeah.
think can play a really good role. And I think it was the right choice right now so far to you take your chance with Josh Lowe and Luke Raley. You have Curtis Mead, you have Jonathan Aranda, you have Kyle Manzardo, all a phone call away if you need it. But like for right now, you can see how much you have with Luke Raley. He's not playing every day. He's playing a spot role. You don't want that for Manzardo. Once he's up, he's starting at first base pretty much every day for hopefully the next 10 years. Same
Yeah.
with like Curtis Mead. So you don't want to do that until you have that. And because we've also seen, which is a good segue to injuries, injuries happen, and it's nice to have a top prospect to call up. And we just saw that. So the good and the bad of the injuries, we should talk about Taj Bradley. We
We
saw
should.
Zach Eflin get injured.
Hmm.
And the update from him is that he is looking, he just threw off the mound, I guess, today and looks good. So without a setback, he should be back starting Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. That's very exciting. But for Zach Eflin's start, Taj Bradley, 22 years old, the first pitcher, I believe, born in the 21st century that has a 2 in front of his name, or 2001. That is impressive, and I'm just got 3 more gray hairs just thinking of that. But Taj Bradley got the start and looked, I think, better than I expected. I mean, he's the Rays' top prospect in a stacked farm system, but he still was dazzling. Like that was a really impressive for a first big league performance, his debut. That was really, really exciting stuff against the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, he felt like after one start, like he's going to join this group of over the last 15 years of just really good pitchers that the Rays turn out. And I started to look more into it. Again, we talked about him, I think, on last week's episode or maybe 2 weeks ago. James Shields, and you just look
Mm.
back at his career and his peak stretch with the Rays was just really good. And since then, you've had him and Chris Archer, obviously David Price and Blake Snell, and I mean Matt Moore, who was a top prospect, but never really reached that full potential. But even guys like Jeremy Hellickson and Matt Garza, who have, whether it's with the Rays or not, gone on to just have solid big league careers. And Taj Bradley just seems like one of those guys that he's going to be a big league pitcher and a really good one. 8 strikeouts, just 1 walk, fell apart in the fifth. Like, okay, you know, nothing to worry about there. Had really
got
good
got
stuff.
get extended a little bit too. I think they like kind of
Yeah,
pushed him a little bit more. I think they had a big lead at that time. They just wanted to sort of see maybe how he could do. So I think that's like one of those things where, again, if you're the Rays and you normally are trying to like maybe maximize, and it was a closer game, you might have even pulled them earlier.
yeah,
But I think you had an opportunity to steal an inning, and and just sort of see what he had. He got a, he still was fairly sharp in that inning. Like he was still missing a couple spots, but he wasn't like imploding. Like the walks weren't there. The command was really good. And the fastball was as good as advertised, if not better. And by Stuff Plus, which is Eno Sarris's model of kind of pitch modeling and just in general his attribute where 100 is basically your average. It's a very small amount of innings, but Taj Bradley's fastball comes in third best in baseball by Stuff Plus. It's the third best fastball behind Jacob deGrom and Spencer Strider. So it's one of the sharpest, most impressive fastballs in Eno's model after those just 5 innings. So that's something to absolutely watch.
Where does McClanahan's fastball rank in that this year? Is he not maybe towards the top of that as much?
Not in his fastball is not.
His curveball has to be
20. His curveball is, if you include relievers, Pete Fairbanks has the best fastball in all of baseball.
Does not shock me at all.
Stuff Plus. It's an elite level pitch. Also, fun fact: Drew Rasmussen has the second best cutter in all of the markings, which that's a fairly newer pitch for him that he has just become absolutely next level with. So Taj Bradley, great fastball. He has that gyro and sweep cutter slider that is become all the rage. The thing he kind of mixed in a little bit was the curveball. He's been a 2-pitch pitcher who needs that third pitch, a third kind of winnable pitch. But the Rays have so many guys like Springs and Rasmussen who they kind of had the same type of thing where they just need to get that extra pitch there to kind of make them work, similar to Glasnow in a lot of ways too. So the curveball looked like more of a surprise pitch for Taj, kind of a loop that people aren't sitting on because that fastball is too tough, and suddenly you could steal a strike. And he did that a couple of times. But it's not one that you'd probably want to try to get a K on. It's just one that you can kind of maybe steal a strike, which is useful. And he's been also working really hard on his changeup. So he will probably be coming back. More than likely, he was on the taxi squad today. He's probably going to be pitching Tuesday in Cincinnati, more than likely. And that's going to be Tuesday or Wednesday, I would say, because that's kind of lines up with him when Jeffrey Springs eventually gets put on the IL. That's the thing that's been kind of waiting on the corresponding move, and it's probably for Taj Bradley. And yeah, we should talk about that. That was I think the biggest, more than the loss of the win streak, the Jeffrey Springs injury was a huge kind of vibe hit.
Yeah, I get sad thinking about really all pitchers. It just feels like they're all so great and fun to watch, and like you always get to talk about how position players and pitchers and who should win MVP, and people always say, well, I tune in to watch the big star position players. They play every night, but there's something about like waiting all week for a certain pitcher's start because you enjoy watching them work so much. There's like always a few in baseball that when I'm looking at that week's schedule and I'm like, okay, this is another game I want to watch. It's not the Rays. Like it's because of a starter. It's never because of, sometimes it's like Mike Trout I want to watch and Yordan Alvarez is fun to watch. But like I want to watch Luis Castillo is one example for me. Just a true workhorse. I wanted the Rays to get him so bad a couple years ago and even last year. But just super fun to watch. Jeffrey Springs was definitely becoming that for me. Like obviously I watch, every Rays game I can. But I was starting to get really excited for those Jeffrey Springs starts because he's different than every other dominant left-handed pitcher out there right now. Yeah, maybe a little bit more old school where like he doesn't have the 95 plus fastball, but he still found ways to get like a lot of strikeouts, a lot of soft contact, and was just pitching really well. And now we might not see him again for the rest of the year. So disappointing. Left ulnar neuritis, or is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um,
Ulnar.
out for at least 2 months. Sounds like there
If there's
might be a need for
surgery,
surgery, though.
yeah, if there's surgery, that's almost certainly the year, and then maybe even into next. So not good. There's a lot of outcomes where it's better, that it could have been just a nerve flare up. There was some hope about that.
I was hoping for a
Turns
blister
out,
where he'd only missed, like, I don't know, blisters cost you about 3 weeks now.
yeah, not too much. But yeah, Springs afterwards didn't. He said he didn't like feel any pop, didn't feel any pain. So
Because he
that's
felt nothing,
good.
right? Because it was just numb.
It felt some weird numbness, yeah, and he couldn't get the quite grip on
So who
it
knows what
that he
popped in there,
wanted to.
Darby? He was numb. Who knows what was going on?
I guess that's
I
true.
don't
Yeah,
trust
the
him.
pain was there, but it was all there. Um, but yeah, it sucks because he was a really fun pitcher to watch. It's a big blow because he was maybe the ace of the staff. Like he was the most elite pitcher that they had right now in a rotation of a lot of elite pitchers. So it's a big person to overcome, to have to actually replace, but also, yeah, just a great story. Just journeyman pitcher who's now become like a elite level starter. Who finally got a nice contract extension from the Rays.
He was going
So
to be an
the good
all-star
news
this year.
is he's gonna be an all-star. He could have been even getting some Cy Young votes. Like
Yeah.
that was, if he had like the makings of a sneaky, maybe not a Cy Young winner, but a guy that could make in the top five. Yeah, it's a huge bummer. Now, hopefully he can rest up, recover. It doesn't need surgery, and can be back sometime in the second half of the season. That is a huge pickup if that's the case. If not, though, then yeah, I think the rotation is looking like right now you have your Shane McClanahan, Drew Rasmussen to the top. You have Zach Eflin coming back this weekend. Josh Fleming is still in the rotation.
Mm.
He's been a little up and down. Not
I think
the
that's what he's
command is
always going to
still
be.
the command is still just not as sharp as you'd want for him. Like I just want more. Just want more from Josh Fleming.
I
But he'll
think,
get a chance.
again, I think it'll stay
It's
that
it's
way. I think you'll
it's
always
gonna
want just a
be.
little bit more from him.
I think so. Probably the case. I think he's in a similar situation to Josh Lowe, in the sense that there is something there and you do have an opportunity to see it. And the bank wins means that you can have a game where he pitches and it's not maybe your best. And yeah, you see what you got. They've won 2 Josh Fleming starts, or bulk appearances, so far out of 3. So there you go. Like that's you just keep doing that, and that's your 5th starter. That's the guy that when Glasnow gets back, that's the person you tag to replace. Springs is a big loss because you were hoping that you had Fleming as the one guy that you don't need, but that's where Taj Bradley coming up really was impressive. It means that the Rays were kind of aggressive in bringing up Bradley and not trying to like piece it together with just Yanni or Patino or Cooper Criswell. They're using those guys as the shuttle guys while Eflin's also out and Springs is out. But you have Taj as a guy that you can slot into the rotation, and he's going to take his lumps, but he is a very talented, good young pitcher. The Mariners showed last year that you have your ace, Luis Castillo, you can then lean on those young arms to kind of fill out that rotation like George Kirby and Logan Gilbert did. The Rays, this is a different spot because they kind of had their young guys coming up doing that a couple of years ago, trying to get that experience. Now Shane McClanahan, he's a veteran. He needs to lead the way. He did and got a great win against Alek Manoah on Sunday to salvage a game, not to avoid that sweep. That's what an ace does. Drew Rasmussen got to keep pitching well. But then you have Taj Bradley. That's going to be an exciting guy to watch because this is an opportunity to potentially hold on to a spot in the rotation. Like this is the the ceiling is high for Taj, and he could be a guy like Shane McClanahan was in a few years ago in like 2021, who is kind of a guy that you're leaning on. Maybe he's a year too early, but if he can be solid and give you something like 2021 Shane McClanahan, that's huge to fill out the back of a rotation.
Yeah, no, definitely. Luis Patino, do you think we'll see him? I mean, with Eflin coming back into the rotation, and Bradley still with a chance to come up and maybe permanently fill that, or I say permanently, fill that Springs role for as long as it needs to be filled, whether it's either him or Tyler Glass now come back. I mean, could we see a Luis Patino? And if not, I know he's had some struggles in Durham, but when do you think the Rays, and he's still very young, and I got to remember he came up a lot faster than a lot of other prospects. What are the Rays vibes on Luis Patino? My vibes aren't good right now, and they haven't been since sometime last year. But what do you think the Rays vibes are on Luis Patino?
I mean, I think the Rays are not a team that's going to give up on a guy with that much talent too soon, especially not pitching talent. I think you're going to see him. I think he'll absolutely get a chance, but I think he's a guy that's had some really bad luck with timing, with the pandemic, with the Padres rushed development schedule, and then with some bad injuries that has not given them an opportunity to really get the full work with the team that they wanted. 2020 was with the Padres and just way too young, rushed up because every one of their pitchers died. 2021 and the season's weird start because the pandemic was still kind of delaying stuff, and then you also had the lockout, so that kind of meant that people were training on their own, not with the team. Also still young, gets injured, misses time. 2022 first start, gets injured, misses so much time. So he really has, I think they're going to try to potentially use him. He'll come up. He's going to be part of the shuttle, right? It's like his time in the rotation is going to come up, and it's going to line up with a bullpen day, and they're going to need him to come up and get some innings. But I think for the most part, what they want to see from him is to put together a pitching plan and start to execute it in Durham. They need to work on his command. They need to get that command right. That's his big thing. The pitches, the stuff is there. It's there. He has the pitches. The command is the problem. If he can get some command, this guy could be a major league starting pitcher. With even a little bit more command, he could be a pretty dominant reliever. He's still so young, though, that you got to give him an opportunity to see what you can do and be that starter.
Yeah.
And people's developments are different. So I think the Rays are going to see him as less of a guy they want to, Cooper Criswell and Yanni Chirinos can come up, fill a role, maybe get sent back down and shuttled around. I think Patino is going to get an opportunity in there, but I think for the most part, they see a guy that if they can get right, he can be a key piece for the future, but he needs to actually get there.
It is shocking.
And I think this is a make or break year. I will say this. I think after this year, I feel like this is either a, Fisher cut bait type of situation.
Well, and I think he'll be out of options next year. I mean, he should be, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Again, because
unless he got an extra one for injuries.
So it still says one. So does that mean next year will be that last one because he's already been optioned this year?
Potentially, yeah. I guess that would be. He might have gotten an extra one, or the pandemic might have actually. I think the 2020 season that might have not have used an option. They were a little forgiving with the rules then.
And he went on like the IL, I think, too. I don't know if he was ever optioned.
Oh, that's true. Maybe not.
I think he was hurt. I could be misremembering. But anyways, yeah, I feel like it's the make or break year for him being a starter. Like a dedicate. Not to say that he couldn't be a multi-inning reliever, but I think if it's next year where he, let's say he is out of options or he's on his last one, it's going to get to the point where how valuable is he, on a roster, especially with, like we said, we already have Taj Bradley. But then you look at Double-A, and there's between Mason Montgomery and Cole Wilcox. Cole Wilcox, a part of the same trade as Luis Patino. They will be pitching in Triple-A next year, and be one of those guys that could potentially see some big league action, depending on how their development goes. And so Luis Patino, I mean, again, a lot of arm talent. He's very young, but you might be like, hey, focus on two pitches, and we're gonna bring you out of the bullpen. And maybe he's a bulk guy, or can give two or three innings, or maybe he is a one inning guy. They say really focus on your fastball and your slider, and try to become a back end reliever.
And it's also possible this year that the Rays usually don't do this, but they could decide the bullpen doesn't have the Ks that it normally does. That's been a big
Yeah,
miss so far in this season. Maybe you do come bring him up because you need a 4 or 5 out guy that can get you Ks, and then you work on moving him to the rotation later, almost like Jeffrey Springs did. But with the injuries, you can never have too much starting pitching. I do think unless the Rays traded for a pitcher or if there was more injuries, I do think you probably don't push the reliever button just yet. Come postseason time, sure, but I think for right now, I think you try to give him an opportunity to start. But down the line, I think there is a lot of room there.
let's talk about the rumor. It's not really a rumor, but Mark Topkin did mention in his Rays rumblings that may there be another injury or someone have a setback, that the Rays are in the market for could potentially be in the market for a starting pitcher. Which, like, sure, if McClanahan gets hurt and Glass now stubs his toe on some bathroom furniture, a la Blake Snell, like, yes,
Dangerous, that
yes, the
bathroom
Rays
furniture.
would probably look at the starting pitching market, but they will anyways because they're the Rays and they're a big league organization. But like, what's that? I know we set in the offseason the line of like, okay, you need to be better than this pitcher to be worth the Rays spending free agency dollars, or in this case, trade chips. Because if the Rays come asking for any pitcher, I mean, that's just the cost is going to go up right there, no matter what. Look at the Boston
Mm-hmm.
Red Sox giving us Jeffrey Springs for pennies on the dollar. But what market would you set for the Rays? Like, who are the names, or what level of pitcher are they going after?
It's funny when I saw that Topkin thing, I had even come close to looking at like guys that I think the Rays would realistically even target, because there's like you don't want to fill the rotation with just bulk, right? So I think you
Yeah.
have to get if you're adding somebody, you want him to be as good or better than Zach Eflin, and that's not that many pitchers, and not many pitchers that are available. You could potentially see a guy like Lucas Giolito if the White Sox
Ooh.
decide to just like implode and pull the plug. Um, but I don't think they are. I think they're too committed in there. I think you could see the Rays could look at. He's not right now above the Zach Eflin line, but he could be, especially with his new little pitch mix. But Brad Keller as a cheap vet
Yeah.
from the Royals, he's looking a little bit sharper.
Brad Keller
Um,
seems way more gettable than Lucas Giolito.
he does, but he's also like that's the. But is he a needle? Like, is that a guy you fill the rotation with? Like if the Rays did, then I think they would see the new
If
pitch changes as a real thing and not just small sample size boost. I think you could also see. I think the Giants are sinking fast, so Alex Cobb, I think, is a guy that would absolutely fit an Alex Cobb reunion,
Yeah.
or even Anthony Descalfani. I think that's another guy that's like always been pretty solid, like a really, really solid pitcher, kind of like a Zach Eflin, who maybe with really better defense behind him would have even better performances and results. But I don't know. It's a really difficult, and with the extra wild card spot, there's not going to be as many sellers, especially early. So I think it's a tricky spot where I don't think you can easily go out there and get an arm because there's just not that many out there that are that gettable.
Would this just sounds silly coming out of my mouth, and it definitely won't happen. Um, it was kind of like the Juan Soto Rays their name I think was in the first group of players. But
Hmm.
at what point in the season is your first call to Perry Manasian and asking, all right, where do we want to start with this? With the Rays going after Shohei Ohtani. I mean, I just want to kind of, maybe this is our Raise Your Voice segment because we haven't really done one yet. Like, are the Rays crazy enough to do it? Because I think the answer is yes. Uh,
Sure.
Two, I mean, just where would it start? And it would be mind-bogglingly high. I'm interested to hear your
Yes.
thoughts.
Oh man. Um, I don't know if I don't know if I that's one of those things where it's like I don't know if any GM has the stones to do that, and that's including Perry trading him away.
Mm,
You are basically like why do you even need a GM if you're trading Ohtani and you can't
yeah,
win with Ohtani and Trout? We can just find a cheaper version of you, Perry. You're
right.
out of here. Art will just save that money and hire like an intern to do it because it doesn't matter. Like if you can't win with this, then you're in for a long rebuild. If
I
you
mean,
don't
it
have
would
a
have to
plan to
be
re-sign him.
it would have to be like a Moreno order, like you need to trade Otani because he's not coming back. It just doesn't seem very
I mean,
Moreno like.
that's
Uh,
not art.
but anyways,
If you were the Rays and you were doing this, you are I think the Angels would have to start it at like Manzardo and Bradley to even not hang up immediately. And I think that's the start of the the discussion. Is a Manzardo or Mead
yeah, and
and
Bradley has to be.
Taj. So you have to get your pitcher. You have to get a pitcher and a hitter because you're trading a pitcher and a hitter. And neither of those guys are as good as Shohei Ohtani. So you then are probably saying we need more. They maybe even try to throw in like some of their bad contracts like into that. Like I don't know.
Mm.
Like that's
I mean,
I can't
the Rays aren't going to take on like Anthony
they
Rendon.
can't. No, they can't. But that's why I just do not know any team. The Yankees don't have the prospects to do it.
But
The
I'm not
Mets
convinced the
don't have the
Rays
pros.
do.
The Mets maybe. The Rays have the prospects, but definitely not the ones. Most of them are graduated. So then you'd have to be like trading like
Yeah,
Randy or Rosarena or something like that. Which
I mean, I
does
think
that make that doesn't make you better?
I
Shane
think
McClanahan. Like they probably start with like, because like Shane Boz is injured, so you don't even have him. You have like probably like Taj Bradley, Drew Rasmussen, and then I Josh Lowe plus another like top prospect like Mason Montgomery. Like it's not like an absurd level. I don't think there's a price again for half a season of Shohei that is an unreasonable ask. And I can't mentally come up with a trade that I would want to offer that I wouldn't feel like is insulting, that I would accept, that I would want to trade. Like I feel like any trade that you
for a
could get
rental,
done
like it's
for a
not even.
rental of Shohei, I think it's like it would be a trade that I think unless you can do it with just prospects, but I think you could better use that for somebody else
Because this is
or
it's
many
very
others.
like with Juan Soto. I thought the return was somewhat low. I don't think they got like ripped off. Like I think they got a bunch of really good prospects, and if their front office is worth a damn, like they can build around what they got. But I did
Yeah,
think there was like the lack of a sure thing prospect. Like
it's tough, right? I think Abrams and Gore are really interesting. But like, yeah, Abrams is a guy that I don't love, and Gore
yeah, like I don't
I
love.
agree. I think I want like somebody that I'm like this one is A1, this one is B, but I think could be A. And then I want some other sweeteners that if anything, if everything goes bad, I can maybe salvage something.
Right.
I think it's a very rich it's a very rich prospect pool, but not with like height. It's like
Yeah.
it's not expensive. It's like a lot. It's a buffet. I really thought of it as like a buffet, which is like this is all decent, and
Like
it's a
every
lot of it.
prospect that was in that trade, I'm like, oh yeah, he's a good prospect. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
some.
he's a good
I
prospect.
mean, they traded a bunch of great, like not great. They traded a bunch of very good prospects.
Yeah.
But I don't want 4 quarters for $1. I
Mm-hmm.
want $2 plus maybe a few dimes and a nickel
Mm-hmm.
and an old penny that could be worth a lot, but maybe it's just a penny.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
that's what I kind of want for Shohei Ohtani. I need like so much more than that even. And
like,
that Nats or that Nats and Padres trade, it like empties out the Padres like farm system, but it empties out like a lot of guys that could have also become like blocked and kind of just not that like they had no runway. Like the runway could have been running out very quickly for guys like Abrams and Gore. And soon you might be like, well, they're kind of not that great of prospects and we don't have any room for them. And now we have to trade them for a reliever. And so I think they traded him at the right time. If I'm the Padres, I do that deal uh again and again.
oh yeah.
I I also hope to re-sign Soto, so I think that's pretty good. I think it's really tough if you're trading for Ohtani, paying the price, and you might have a package to offer, but not for a more than 3 years.
Right.
I could see the Rays
Mm.
offering a 3 year, $150 million deal, like 50 million a year.
I think they'd have
But
to
I
bid
don't
higher
think,
than that to get him for three
but they'd have to
years.
go way higher. You'd have to go way higher, and you'd also have to go for way longer.
Like if he went for,
Because like
and I think he's going to sign a he's going to sign the very largest contract in the history of the game. He will get way more than he's
and
like
deserves every penny.
right. And I say this, he'll get way more than what he's actually worth on the baseball field, which I know we're still having a really hard time quantifying how much he's worth. But
Oh yeah,
he is going to get astronomically higher than that. Like he will somehow still be overpaid, but will he be because he is without a doubt the most valuable player in the game.
yeah.
So with that being said,
I'd love him. I'd love that to be on the Rays, but
like
I
if he
I
were
don't
to
know
take
if
a
I can.
3 year deal, it would be $200 million. I think, like
Yeah,
maybe
if
with
that. Me,
incentives.
I think you could even ask for more, but yeah.
He'll sign.
I think if you're risking that short term, I think you'd have to go even higher. I don't think the Rays can go higher, but I think you'd have to go higher. But I think you take the long term because that's your last contract, and you are a pitcher, and pitchers are the worst position health wise
Yeah, I mean,
on this earth.
what's his AAV gonna be? Like, what's your guess? And let's like just try to guess without knowing the years.
I think if it started with a 4, I think that would be where I'd want to start with. Unless you're really going, unless you're going very long term, and then you might even bump it up a little bit. I mean,
I mean, I think it's in the
what's the highest?
fives.
What's the highest right now? So I think 50 mil is very. I
Yeah,
think that's what it ends up with. Because if they,
yeah.
but I think you run the risk. Here is the one thing that could cap his price point is there's just so few people that are going to be able to bid at that level. So you then go, who is going to be bidding against each other? Can the Yankees come in at a $50 million price point? Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously they can, but like, will they? They are going to like the Steinbrenner brothers have not been wanting to pay that tax. Cohen will. The Giants, they missed out on everybody, so they could maybe raise it up. The Dodgers,
So
the Angels.
there are three
I mean,
players that average on their current deals above 40 million, and they all play in New York. It's Aaron Judge with his new deal, Justin Verlander, and Max Scherzer, who are both on short term deals.
mhm.
Guys with like even Jacob Degrom, next highest at 37 million, is on a 5 year deal.
He's a little older. He's a little older
Garrett Cole's deal
and a
was
lot of
for
injuries.
several years, right? It was at
Yep.
least 7 or 8.
Seven, I think.
36 million. So that's the one where you really see like him and Judge with the length, and they are, you know, arguably the second best pitcher and the second best hitter of the game, besides behind Shohei Ohtani.
By the single man. Yeah, no, I think, gosh, I do think if you can, I think it could end up being like 4 or 5 just because of the market cap of how many teams can offer. But I would not be surprised if it ended up 5-0,
Yeah,
if it ended up 50. Just because if you're thinking of that, you're thinking, oh, I get Judge plus Cole, but I don't have to pay 87 million per year. I get to pay 50 or 55 million per year.
so I think what a trade would look like, just all
It
as a
could save the
general.
cap. It could save the cap,
It
actually.
could.
That's
It could.
that's
It
the
could.
smarter. That's Cohen, that's your smart thinking. It's actually you'd be losing money if you didn't spend it.
That's right. Um, I think it would be Bradley. I, I don't know. Manzardo might be higher on some lists than Mead at this point. It's
Mm-hmm.
close between them. I would go Bradley, Manzardo. I think Rasmussen plus like 2 more prospects. I mean, Randy, I don't know. it, it gets real scary real fast. I'll say this. I'll say Bradley, Manzardo, Rasmussen, Montgomery. Maybe they take Greg Jones as that last
Sneak him
sweetener.
in there.
Yeah, you guys
Um,
want Greg Jones too, right? Our former first round pick. You said, is
it
that
could
who you
be that's
said?
a former first round pick. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
former first round
Cool.
pick.
But
That'll
maybe
look
like
good on
a
the
it's
Baseball America list.
maybe that last piece is like a Carlos Colmenares, like a guy that was really highly touted when the race first signed him. He's kind of cooled
Yeah.
down as a prospect since then. But maybe he is like that last piece, like a guy like, oh, he was supposed to be really good. Let's see what the race saw on him, type of thing. I don't
I
know.
think that's an offer that the Angels could entertain because you have a bunch of pieces that would help right now
Yeah,
during Trout's playing time. Um, but also I do think you look at that and you're suddenly like that the you are replacing Rasmussen with Ohtani. So that is a plus. You're improving your rotation,
yeah,
but at the cost of improving your rotation and your offense, you are really taking a lot of pieces of your depth, and especially the pitching depth. I think they might be even more interested in trading the position player. Honestly, though, it's like one of those deals where if it ever happened, you just enjoy the moment and don't think about tomorrow and the hangover that comes.
yeah. I mean, cause
It's going
yeah,
to be a doozy. It's going to be a bad hangover.
I,
2024, you're waking up and you're like, oh, what did I do? But God, the memories.
you know, like at what point if they lose Otani, either in free agency or whatever, um, at what point does Mike Trout request a trade? Like I think that would happen within the next like 2 years after that.
I would hope. I would just hope
Like
for his sake.
and I
Just
think
Angels blow it up if you can't do it. If
in
you can't make the playoffs this year, just blow it up.
baseball's like really out of the 4 major sports, really is like the only one where like players just being able to request a trade willy nilly like hasn't really become a thing in the sport.
Mm.
And I'm not saying player power is a bad thing, but baseball just hasn't, at least publicly, like stuff that leaks out we don't know about it happening that much in baseball or causing that much drama. But like I feel like a Mike Trout getting his way out, going to form a super team somewhere else, like that could be what starts it in baseball. Like
It could.
it took some of these other big time trades in the last decade for that to happen really in the NFL and the NBA. Like players just realizing how much they're worth and how much they can control franchises.
And I think if you're Mike Trout, if you request a trade and it's public, then that kills the Angels' chances of signing anybody.
Yeah.
And so I think then they almost have to trade him because then I think then they become a toxic team to attract big time free agents. I mean, you can still sign them. I mean, Chris Bryant went to the Rockies, but like I think that would be potentially like I don't know if I want to go to that situation for any equal
Yeah,
money.
it's crazy. Like in the NBA, I mean, like teams never really know who's like on their roster the next day. Like they'll just say, "Oh,
Mm.
I'm not going to play. Like I'm just going to sit out with a sore wrist
All
and
the
miss 30
power,
games."
all the power.
Like what Kevin
Yeah.
Durant has done, but now he's back in the
We'll
playoffs.
see. Will Trout become the new KD?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Doesn't
Anyway,
doesn't seem like the type, but we'll see.
this has turned into an Angels podcast, but they are the most interesting professional
This
sports
is the most
franchise.
interesting mess.
Yeah.
What a fun mess. Gosh.
So Taj Bradley, hopefully not going to away in a trade unless it's for Shohei Ohtani. I think
Yes.
that's the big takeaway from the week. Jeffrey Springs, it just makes me really sad. I think I lose interest in baseball for a few days after like a pit, like when Glasnow got hurt last year. I just
Mm.
didn't watch as much. I was just like bummed.
Yeah. It's a bummer. I think, but that's where having Taj Bradley is nice because I think
I mean, it's
we can
nice
be
for me, but
bummed.
it doesn't help Jeffrey Springs. Like he's still hurt. Like that's what makes me sad. It's
Yes.
not. It's not the effect on the
I'm
team.
I'm feeling much better though because I feel bad for Jeffrey Springs. I just feel very thankful though this year that he did get his contract. So like
Yeah.
he has stability. Like he knows this team is committed to him. The Rays have a very good medical personnel and their recovery rates have been great. So like this is a guy that's in great hands. So at
Mhm.
the very least, listen, there's no good time to get an injury. There's no good time. This would absolutely suck. But he's in an organization that he has seen so many guys come through and return as good or better. And
Mhm.
he's got his contract. He's got some guaranteed money. His family is taken care of. This can be, you never have a good time for an injury, but at the very least, this is an opportunity for him to be able to be like, well, the Rays have committed to me. I've committed to them. I hate to not compete, but at the very least, this is not floating in the nebulous trying to fight for the next contract or on a team where you're just not fully trusting where they're going. I think in that regard, that's where this makes the situation, at least for me, a little bit more like I'm like I feel heartbroken for him, and I hate to not see him pitch, but I'm like, well, I'm really happy he got that deal. Like, because
Uh,
now he's at least has that security and he can it takes a bit of that stress off, I'm sure. Like there's still going to be that awful, competitive spirit of needing to compete and not being able to and having to recover. But at the very least, like there is the little bit of stress left, like family, they can have a place, they know where they're living, they know where they're coming to work, they know where they're going to be, and he can focus entirely on that recovery.
yeah. So the Rays didn't take a pre-free agent reliever and just burn him to the ground on purpose. Yeah. Take that, John Becker. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
I would say that's a low blow, but that's how low you'd have to punch to get to John Becker.
yeah, definitely. There you go. Um, so Jeffrey Springs, hopefully he's back soon. Um, it's yeah, it's just tough, but
It's a
the
bummer.
Rays
Yeah.
will move on, and maybe it's best case scenario. Maybe he's back for the postseason alongside Tyler Glass now. So we've gone well over time here, but a lot of good discussion, including a lot about Shohei Ohtani for some reason. I don't know why I brought it up, but hey,
When in doubt, when you need content,
yeah,
Shohei's your guy.
yeah, definitely. All right, Darby. This time again. Well, I guess next week we'll try to get again on Sunday and post on Monday. Instead, this week we're Monday. It'll be out Tuesday when hopefully the Rays bounce back against the Reds. So make sure to follow us on Twitter at Darby_Robinson and at BG Rutherford99. Also, keep following D-Rays Bay, draysbay.com. These podcasts will still be posted on draysbay.com. And soon, hopefully this week or next week, we are actually on a podcast network again rather than just your YouTube screens. But thank you guys for listening, and Darby and I will talk to you next week.